All right, roll them.
Bar Podcast, Eric Story, Part 2.
Hey, thanks everybody for listening in once again to the Bar Podcast. We are coming at you today from LDR Studios in Noblesville, Indiana. So thank you to MC Dustin and MC Clark. Clark A, that is.
Okay, we.
That's right. That's right. But thank you guys very much for listening in today. Before we get rolling here, I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to shout out where you can find us. Go out and find us, like us on Facebook, of course, at Building a Refuge, and you can also find us on TikTok now.
Yes.
That is new. TikTok at Building a Refuge, as well as our YouTube channel at Building a Refuge. So go out, find us, like us, and hopefully you can hit a lot of likes on that. That'd be good, right? A lot of likes, a lot of likes.
That's right.
As well, before we get going, as we usually do, just, if you are struggling or if you're, going through something, we have a couple of resources we'd like to share with everybody. You can text the 494949. You can text refuge to 494949. And you can also reach out to the newest, I believe it's the newest anyways, 988 is the new number for the National Suicide Hotline. You can also, for all of our veterans out there, thank you first and foremost to you guys, but the Veterans Crisis Line, you can also reach out to them at 1-800-273-8255. So we like to at least let everybody know some of those resources anyways that you can go check out. So,
Yeah.
Eric.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing again, sir?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm more grateful to you, though, since we were able to talk with you a little while ago, and now we are going to walk into the second part of your story. So pretty amazing where we left things off anyways. Going through a pretty difficult time of life with the business and things like that you were struggling with, and really kind of, I think, it was a challenging time, man.
Yeah,
and
very much so.
we're excited to kind of talk through some of it. I know it's not, I don't know if excited is the right word, but I appreciate you sharing it. I guess that's the biggest thing.
Well, the biggest thing for, at Building a Refuge is we always want to present the idea of hope, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend one time tell me that if I'm standing in front of you, you're witnessing hope.
Yeah.
Because the fact that people can go through the things that they go through and the ups and downs and the valleys and the high points that people live through, the fact that they're here and they made it another day is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a really good thing.
Well, I know, man, where you were kind of sitting at, like I said in the last episode that we talked with you, man. I mean, you were in a pretty challenging part of life with a lot of, I think a lot of the trigger points that we talked through when you think about going through a business loss and some of the family things going on at home, and a lot of these things kind of weigh into you kind of on your own mind, right? I mean, I think that's kind of where we were at. And all of these stories that we get to hear on this podcast and your own, my own, I know that MC Clark A has been so kind to also offer some guidance that he's going to give us at some point in time here down the road. So we're grateful for that, MC Clark.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. But yeah, maybe we can just kind of start off where we left off, Eric, and kind of continue on, man.
Well, that just kind of a little bit of a recap. I was in my basement, and there was at that point in time, my mind was quite a playground. There was a lot of stuff swirling in my head, a lot of things that I was conjuring up in my own mind, and thoughts that were being dropped into my own mind that weren't really true. In lots of different things, and that took me to a place to where, the morning that my wife left for school and to go drop the kids off at school, that was kind of the time where I had made that decision. And I was in day 3, so I had started thinking about it 2 days prior.
Yeah.
And then the second day, thoughts just kind of were swirling and trying to make sense of what was going on. And then that third day, that morning was the day where I was like, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's
It really just, I want to just kind of take a step back so we kind of frame this up, what I mean, for everybody that's kind of listening out here. So time frame wise, again, where were, like year wise, where was this at?
2009.
Okay.
2009, early 2010. It was right around Thanksgiving. 2009.
And this was a time frame when, in your world and what you were doing from a business perspective, I mean, the market was going through a pretty turbulent time. Tanked. Yeah. And just to frame things up, I mean, when we talk about, when you're saying, hey, this is the day, you were really contemplating, taking your own life.
Yeah. And I've told my story many times, and just most of the time I frame it around, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but my wife called me on it about 5 or 6 months ago and said, "You knew how you were going to do it, didn't you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, I did. I just don't want people. I didn't want
the
kids to know. I didn't want her to know. I didn't want her to put through that. But it's a scenario where I have a staircase down in my basement, and my wife had said goodbye and I love you, as she was going to school, and I said I love her, and I remember just turning the TV off and getting up off the couch, and in order to get to the bathroom, which is where I was going to do what I was going to do, you have to walk past my staircase that goes down to my basement. And I remember getting up off the couch. I remember thinking to myself, "This is it. This is it."
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I remember.
Yeah.
And the next thing I remember is I'm standing at the top of my staircase. And when I got to the top of my staircase, the only thing that I heard in my mind was, "Get out of the house, get out, get in your car and go. Get out of the house." It just kept saying, "Get out of the house, get out of the house, get out of the house."
Yeah.
So I grabbed my keys that were sitting on the island right there, and I got into my big obnoxious Jeep that I had at the time and that you couldn't miss from a mile away, and jumped in it, and I didn't know where I was going, but I went.
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't know what that voice was, but I know now.
Yeah.
I know who brought me to the top of that staircase. I know who put me in that car, and I know where he was leading me.
Yeah.
And he was protecting me.
Yep.
I'm here. You and I both know, the fact that building a refuge is rooted in our faith.
Absolutely.
Yours and mine.
Yeah.
And we don't have a scenario where we talk to a lot of guys where we don't really present that too often.
Right.
But I'm telling my story.
Yeah.
This is my story, and I need to be honest with the people who are listening.
Yeah.
That I know who took me to the top of that staircase.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know who was talking to me, and I know who saved me that day.
Yeah.
And I thank him daily for it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But it was an interesting day because you walk outside and it's pretty cloudy, and it's not something that we thought. It was a kind of a busy day on the streets, and
Yeah.
it was probably 9 o'clock or so in the morning, and so it was pretty busy on the roads. And
Yeah.
I was driving over a bridge on one of the major highways that's right by my house, and I'm sitting at a stoplight, and I get a phone call, and it's from my buddy Doug, who I hadn't seen in probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And he was integral in bringing me and helping me understand and know who God is 3-4 years back.
Wow.
And so that seed that was planted that day, he called me and says, "Hey man, how are you?
Yeah.
I haven't talked to you for a while." And I was like, "Well, to be honest with you, Doug,
That day
we're crossing over the bridge. This is the same morning that
Yeah.
God told me to get in the car
Yeah.
and just drive." So I'm driving along the road, and I get a phone call from Doug saying, "Hey man, I saw you at the stoplight. How you doing? What's going on?" And Doug, and I said, "Man, it's going terrible.
Yeah.
To be honest with you." And he's like, "All right, there's a Starbucks, 2 blocks
Yeah.
down the road. Let's go grab coffee. Let's talk."
Yeah. Yeah.
So we sat there for 3 hours, and in the previous podcast, I told everybody that I was keeping all this to myself.
Yeah.
Like, my wife knew a little bit about what was going on, just because the balance in the checkbook was getting much
That's
smaller.
right. Yeah.
But that was the extent of it.
Yeah. I mean, you shared some good examples, I think, of where that was kind of bubbling, and you had probably some opportunity, but
I had a
again,
bunch
we're
of-
guys, right? And we're gonna just be like, "Oh, everything's good. I got it."
Yeah, and all those thoughts that were running through my head in that morning that I decided I was going to take my life. That morning, it was like, you're protecting her by doing this. You're protecting her by not telling her about the money. You're protecting her about telling her about things that are coming up. You're protecting her by just being gone.
Yeah.
And so, and that's just all lies.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all false.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool that Doug took that time to sit with me at Starbucks. We sat there for about 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just literally puked up everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about Doug is he knows Jesus, and
Yeah.
he has a peace about him, and he has a calmness about him to where he didn't offer me solutions.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't offer me some kind of a magic formula to get out of it, because at that point there was no getting out of what I was going through.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just listened
Yeah.
for 3 hours and allowed me the opportunity to get that stuff off my shoulders, because it's amazing what that will do to you physically.
Yeah.
By holding that stuff in. It destroys you from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you can get an opportunity to sit in front of somebody who genuinely cares about you, because he exhibited that to me 4 years prior.
Sure.
By spending time with me then,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's spending time with me to talk to me about, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What do you need to do? I'm telling Doug, I just shared with him the fact that I was just getting ready to off myself.
Right.
And now I'm sitting here in front of him. What the hell do I do next?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to do next. I haven't thought about next because there wasn't a next.
Yeah, it's, man, I try to, like, when you're sharing this with me, I'm envisioning it, we are relatively from the same town, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of understand where the Starbucks is. I know where the bridge is at. I know where all this is at. And so I kind of run it through my own mind, right? And you start to think about this stuff, but there's a lot of, I think, similarities just in terms of, like, how we will want to, and when you said, hey man, you keep this stuff inside, it's going to destroy you. It's going to continue to eat at you. It's going to continue to, kind of gnaw at you.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, that you heard this voice, whatever, right? That says, hey man, go for a drive, just decompress, whatever that felt like.
Yeah.
And this dude calls you.
Yeah. It wasn't decompress. It was get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you got to do. And I know why.
Yeah.
Because there was evil down there.
Yeah.
Like and I don't mean to get into the.
I understand.
But it was where I was at, and I have a lot of people who ask me about my experience because they've lost a loved one to suicide, and like, what was going through your head, and what was going on in your mind. It's like, I can't. It's hard to explain it because it wasn't. I was out of my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I was completely removed from myself. Once I made that decision, it was almost like, for lack of a better term, it was almost like an autopilot.
Right.
And when I got up off the couch, he intercepted that, and he took that,
right,
and he brought me up from that evil place.
Yeah.
And brought me out, and don't need to be cheesy, but he brought me out into the light.
Yeah.
I'd spent 3 days in the dark.
Yeah.
And he brought me upstairs and brought me into the light, and he intersected me with somebody who knew him, intersected me with somebody who he knew would listen to me because he knew what I had in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
He knew what I needed to get out.
Yeah.
He knew what was just eating me and killing me from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so I got an opportunity to do that, and that was really my first experience with being able to be vulnerable and transparent all at the same time.
Yeah.
And not be ridiculed, not be judged, not be told what to do, all those things that we don't want to have happen when we come out. I'm incredibly fortunate. I don't know where my life would be right now had I not had somebody sitting in front of me who reacted the way Doug did.
Yeah.
Not a facial expression to where it was like judgmental.
Yeah.
I'm talking nothing.
Yeah.
He was just there, and he was a sounding board for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first true experience with, okay, you can do this. Like, you the next step is, and this was suggested to me by Doug at the end of our conversation, is you need to get back in the car, and when your wife gets home, you need to go and tell her everything.
Yeah.
And
how did that make it feel? Was
scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, but I was just gonna ask you, did it scare you?
Scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't. like that will crush her, and she's going to divorce me, and she's going to take my kids.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be living in an apartment somewhere all by myself.
Yeah, and that's what you were telling yourself, right?
Oh, I mean, it just snowballs. You know, that's not what I was thinking
Yeah.
immediately when Doug told me that, but on my car ride home, I was like, holy shit, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like thoughts get dropped into your head, and it's, they're not yours, they're somebody else's.
Oh yeah.
And it just continually snowballs and snowballs and snowballs until you get that reminder of who you are, what you're here for, and that's what Doug kept reminding me of, who I am.
Yeah.
How he sees me, what I'm meant to do. And he's like, I don't know what all this means.
Yeah.
I don't know what your future looks like, but I do know this.
Yeah.
You get your ass in the car and go tell your wife what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And wherever it takes you is where it takes you.
That's right.
But you've built this thing, and now you got to go.
But man, how
face
hard
it.
I mean, that's got to be for you. I mean, it gives me anxiety to listen to you, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's got to be for you, like like how do I do this?
That's what I spent the next, it was a couple hours before she got home.
Yeah.
That's what I spent the next couple hours, is how do I do this? Well, and I'd love to tell you this story that I was like, oh, I laid it all out and did all this stuff.
Yeah.
I chickened out and didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that was a Thursday or Friday.
Yeah.
And we were going to an event at church on Sunday.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Saturday night. I chickened out from Thursday to Saturday night, and our drive up, we were going up north of Muncie.
Okay.
And our drive up there, I had this, she was driving, and I sat in the passenger side, and I was like, you are a gutless bastard. Like you got to do something. And like all these, I mean, I went from, for people who aren't around here, probably 50 miles.
Yeah.
Just swirling thoughts.
Right.
How are you going to do this? You can't do this. If I do it, how do I do it? And there was one time where I thought back to the way that Doug addressed me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, hey, do you think you better call your wife and tell her? Do you think you better? It's like, get your ass in the car and go tell your wife what you did.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all of a sudden, I just blurted it out. I'm like, honey, and then boom, like, here's everything.
Yeah.
Here's what it is.
Yeah.
And I remember we pulled off in Anderson. We pulled off the exit.
Yep.
And we sat in a Wendy's parking lot for a couple hours, and I told her everything. And between telling Doug, for those couple hours that I sat with him, those 3 hours I sat with him, and those couple hours I sat with my wife, that was the most free that I had felt in 2 years prior.
Say, yeah, probably in 2-3 years, for sure.
Easily 2 years. And it was, while it was freeing for me, it was crushing for my wife.
Oh man. Yeah.
Because I don't even really, I'd like to think back about it, but I just remember, like, because I didn't even have enough balls to look at her.
Yeah.
I was just like doing one of these. I'm sure I was curled up, like looking like a little wuss or something. But and I occasionally I would catch her out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah.
Or I'd look at her, and she was just crushed.
Yeah.
But you know what she didn't do?
Yeah. She didn't leave you.
She didn't leave me.
No.
She didn't divorce me.
Yep.
She didn't take my kids. I don't live in an apartment.
Yep.
She didn't do any of that shit.
Yeah.
And all that stuff that was told to me was a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have a person, two people in your life, which now, as today, I sit here today, I've got a dozen of those people in my life.
Yeah. Right.
That I could, at any point in time, I could say, hey, here's what's going on in my life.
Yep.
And it happens. But at that point, I had nobody.
Yeah.
And now I've got, in 2 days, I've got Doug, and I've got a glimpse of what real marriage looks like.
Yeah.
I've got a glimpse at what being a husband looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've got a long road to go because I just puked up everything that I'd
like
done for the last
where
couple
we're at.
years.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't, and then we just started walking through it together.
Yeah.
Okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean?
Yeah, but you just said it. You're walking through it together, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was still, while we were doing it together, I was like, oh man, one point in time, she's going to catch wind of something else, or something else is going to happen, and she's going to realize, she's going to wake up,
Yeah.
and she's going to be gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I was always kind of on pins and needles while we were still walking through this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that trust and that transparency, I'd got a glimpse of it, but I didn't fully trust it.
Yeah.
I didn't fully. I'm like, yeah, come on, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like I even had thoughts like after Doug, I'm like, Doug's going to be calling somebody being like, you are not going to believe what I just heard from Erik.
Right.
And none of that happened.
Yeah.
I know that none of that happened.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to my wife and I'm telling her everything that's going on,
Yeah.
you know, I had to share with her the financial issues. I had to share with her the fact, because she knew some of the investors that I had. She knew the partnership that I had. Had to share with her all that stuff that was going on. But what I also had to share with her is the fact that I was being investigated by the FBI. Yeah.
So you left that out last time. You didn't let anybody know that.
No.
I'm not laughing about it. Believe me, I'm not.
No, because it's
So let me ask this question. In the timeline here, the timeline was around 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
How long had this investigation been going on that you knew about?
When I knew about it, only a couple months.
Okay.
Yeah, only a couple months, and they were just inquiring.
Yeah.
There was some other stuff that had gone on with a partnership. There was a couple other people that were doing some stuff, and they were just inquiring to me and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" We had some of our houses that got foreclosed on. We had some of the different things that happened, and that automatically brings up red flags in lots of different places.
Right.
But there was one specific instance that they didn't like, and they asked me about it.
Mm-hmm.
They came to my house. And when they came to my house, I was completely caught off guard. And it was just two agents. They came to my house and they started talking to me, and I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, is this the point in the movie where you ask for an attorney and say I can't say anything? Or what?
Holy crap.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, well, I better, talk to my attorney and then I can get back to you guys.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of went on forever, and we just kind of went on with life, and I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
I didn't think. I was like, they're looking at somebody else, they're doing something else, or whatever it is. And so this takes us up to about like May of 2011.
Okay.
There's lots of different things going on. I'm trying to reinvent myself as a business owner.
Yeah.
Doing some general contracting, doing some different things. I'm just trying to get my head back above water. All the while, we're not making mortgage payments. We lost our car. I know that we're going to eventually get kicked out of our house at some point in time.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I'm just trying to do something I've never done before.
Yeah.
And that's general contracting. And so we were doing that. There really wasn't a lot going on. And then May of 2011, some listeners might remember a tornado that hit Joplin, Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
That literally flattened the whole damn town.
Yeah. I worked for a company that I spent a little time there.
Yeah. So in May, so it would have it hit the weekend before Memorial Day.
Yeah.
We went that next weekend.
Yeah.
And we had a friend of ours that there's a big seminary school there.
Okay.
And we had two pastors from our current church that we were going to that had gone to school there.
Okay.
So we're like, where do we go? Like I didn't have anything going on. We packed the kids up, and my sister-in-law gave us a van.
Mm-hmm.
So we packed them up in the van. And we're like, we're just going to go volunteer. We don't know what the hell we're doing. We don't really know where we're going. We got the name of a church to go to.
Right.
So we just pull into town. It's a 9-hour, 10-hour drive, whatever. And we pull into town, and we pull into this church, and this church is huge. It's a huge church. And there's semi trucks pulling up to it with water in it and all this stuff. I mean, it's a week later.
Yeah.
After the thing, and stuff starts to mobilize pretty quick in those relief situations. So there's a whole lot of activity. They got tents set up at this church, and they literally have like a shopping market, like a grocery store and a clothing store that are in there that people come in there and they go through there. And so our job when we first got there was to check people's IDs.
Interesting.
And we're just standing there in front of this tent, just checking people's IDs.
Yeah.
And saying who they are. And so we were sitting there doing that for 3 or 4 hours, and it was hot as hell. I mean, it was probably 100 degrees that day.
Yeah.
And my son and I, there was a little playground. We were over there at the playground, and this lady comes up and says, "Hey, I've got 3 or 4 grocery carts, full of groceries. Could you guys help us?" And my wife calls us over, and we go help her to her car.
Yeah.
Well, while we're going to her car, we're asking her, "How were you affected by the tornado? What was going on?" And she still tells her story. Well, she had a nursery school. She had a daycare in Joplin, and I didn't know this until later, but most of Joplin was little like at home daycares. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
Joplin's a blue collar town. It's a really cool little town.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of little places all over the place. Well, 17 of those facilities, I found out later, a couple months later, 17 of those daycare facilities got smashed,
smoked.
flattened.
Yeah.
So there's no place for kids to go. And so I got this lady's story about what the last week of her because the tornado had hit a week ago.
Right.
And what her day consisted of.
Yeah.
This woman had a house in just off of where everything had hit, and she was bringing kids in. She would families who were trying to rebuild their house or picking up the mess.
Yeah.
They would just drop their kid off who hasn't showered in a day or two. So she was bathing kids and trying to get kids clean and fed, and she was licensed for like 15 kids, and there was like 50 or 60 kids in this place.
Yeah.
It was insane. It was chaos.
Yeah.
But she was loading up her grocery carts to take them down there. And I was like, we got started talking, and I told her what I did back in Indianapolis. And she's like, "Would you be willing to come back to the daycare? I'll show you what happened." Because at that point, I was on the north side of town. I hadn't been through town yet. I didn't know. We pulled right into the church.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't seen the devastation. I hadn't seen what was going on.
Yeah.
And so she's like, "I'll take you and your family, pack your stuff up. We'll go to my house. Or we'll go to our daycare, and you can show me what's going on." We got all our stuff up, got in the car, and Brandon, I will never forget this the rest of the time I'm alive. I pull up over, and Joplin sits in a valley.
Yeah.
So we're up on the north-hand side, and I drive over this valley, and we're driving right behind her. And I come up over this hill and down into the valley, and I look out over the whole thing, and there is nothing there other than debris.
Yeah.
And I look over to the left-hand side, and I'm like, what is that huge orange metal pile? It's just this massive pile of orange metal.
Yeah.
It's the freaking Home Depot.
Oh, wow.
That used to be there. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And all there was on both sides of the street, coming and going, in and out of the devastation, was one lane, the width of your car.
Yeah.
And there was roofing materials and 2x4s and shit laying all over the place. And you stayed right in that lane, or you were going to get, nails and stuff in your tire.
Yeah.
And it was 2 miles long of people just lined up. And I'm looking over at buildings that are cinder block that were built back in the 20s probably.
Yeah.
And they had 2x4s sticking into the cinder block. And I'm looking at all this devastation, and I freaking lost it.
Yeah.
I'm like, you got to be kidding me. 163 people, I believe, was the count of people that lost their lives that day.
Yeah.
So she took us down to her daycare, which was on the other side of all this devastation. And we went to her daycare and helped her unpack her stuff, and we stayed there for a couple hours. And she's like, "Hey, would you guys want to come back to our house? We're having some friends over." They were outside of the devastation. Their house was on the northwest side, I think, up on the hill. And so their house didn't get hit. And so they were having friends over, and they were having pizza parties and all that stuff, and just trying to help people.
Yeah.
And so I sat down, and we went back to their house and sat down, and we started talking, and they found out I was a general contractor, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, could you do this? Could you do this?" Because at that point in time, you couldn't find the closest town is Tulsa, and it was like an hour and a half away.
And I suppose you probably were kind of looking for something to do, right?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do. At that point in time, we were just going there to just volunteer.
Yeah.
We were going to be there for the Memorial Day weekend, and we were going to go home.
Yeah.
Well, we did go home, but 2 weeks later, I ended up coming back.
Okay.
And I came back, and I came back again, and I came back again, and that entire summer, I came back, and that church that we first pulled up to, I consulted with that church, and got an opportunity to help volunteers. So the volunteer groups that would come in from all over the country, I would be the one that would coordinate that, get them construction materials, meet them, assign them to a house, and tell the story. And so I spent my entire that summer, hearing stories of loss, hearing stories of hope, the hope that was coming. Because we had groups from Kentucky, from California, from Idaho that would come in 5, 6, 10 people strong.
Yeah.
That would come in and just take over a house, man. It was the most incredible thing I've ever freaking seen in my life. And so I'm sitting there talking to these people. I take them out to dinner the night before they get their construction project starts.
Yeah.
And I get to hear these messages of hope because the family came when they could.
Yeah, yeah.
The family came and we kind of had that introduction.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, take a breath, because for 3, 4, 5 weeks they're sitting in, insulation that was moldy and, their house was destroyed. And most of those cases that I got referred to, there was a loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
And so what that summer did for me was it took the focus off of me. It took the focus off of me sitting there in self-pity, sitting there in all this worry and all these things, because all of a sudden, all the while all this stuff's going on, I'm still talking to investors. I'm still dealing with bankruptcy. I'm still dealing with foreclosure. I'm still dealing with all this stuff back at home. But then when you sit down with somebody, the most amazing story I'd ever heard was there was a wife and a husband and wife, that sat in Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut was a big feature, like on the news stations after it was over.
Yeah.
Because it got completely wiped out. And the only thing that was standing was this refrigerator. Well, this woman and her husband, right before the tornado hit, the manager brought all the people and packed as many people as they could into this refrigerator. Well, they couldn't get the door shut at the end of it. And this woman and man are sitting there right by the door. Well, the man was paralyzed. So his wife was sitting behind him, like hugging him, and had her legs over him, like sitting Indian style on the floor. But they couldn't get the door closed. So when they couldn't get the door closed, the wind sucked her husband right away from her. And he died.
That's crazy.
They found his body like a day later, and he was way far away, and he died. And I'm sitting there talking to this lady and her teenage daughter, who wasn't at Pizza Hut, but she was at home that night. And her daughter was like, I don't even have any other way of saying it, but she was like a zombie. And she couldn't even think of what was going on outside. And so we got started talking, and I'm being told this story, and I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm listening to what she's saying, but I'm thinking, how big are your problems, dude?
Yeah, yeah.
And it just gave me, that summer gave me perspective.
For sure. Yeah.
Because I didn't just get continual messages of, like, here's another one that lost, their house. Here's another one that lost another loved one. It wasn't just consistent tragedy. It was, these people would come in and just offer hope, just by being them, just by being present.
Yeah.
And that's what Doug did for me. He offered me hope by just being present. That's what my wife did for me by just being present.
Yeah. And
willing to work through things with me.
Yeah.
And that's what I got that summer that was so powerful, was that perspective.
Yeah.
Now, that summer didn't end up real great, because all the while I'm in Joplin.
Yeah. And
I'm thinking that really that FBI thing has kind of gone out. I'm not even thinking about that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, in July of 2011, I was back at home.
Okay.
And we had made the decision to move to Joplin. So I was back at home. We were in our current house. We hadn't been kicked out yet.
Okay.
And we're like, we're going to get kicked out soon. That family that had that daycare center had offered for us to stay in their basement.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, we're going to go on faith. At that point, I had seen so much that I just wanted to be a part of whatever was going on out there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be there.
Sure. I mean, I can imagine.
And my wife went reluctantly, and she'll tell you to this day that is not a very memorable time of her life.
Yeah.
Staying in somebody else's basement, and
So you made the move out there.
We moved 100% fully.
Wow.
Packed shit
I don't know
up.
if I knew that.
Yeah, went out to Joplin, and lived out there for 9 months. We had to do it in July because the lady who owned the daycare had offered Jen a job, and it started in August.
Okay.
And so we made the move, and we're like, okay, we're going to commit to going out there during the school year.
Yeah.
And so I went out there, consulted with the church, and did all that stuff. But prior to our move, we had a garage sale. And that was late July. And I had informed my attorney that we were moving.
Okay.
And I guess, well, I know now, I was under investigation by the FBI at that point in time.
Yeah.
And because of their jurisdictions and how they work things, they raided my house. So
while you were there, I mean,
I wasn't there.
Okay.
So we were having a garage sale, and I was actually at my bankruptcy attorney's office, and they didn't know that. They didn't know I wasn't there.
Okay.
So we're having, literally in our neighborhood, a garage sale, and 15 armed, fully
SWAT,
the whole deal, come barging into my house. And the only people that were there were a bunch of people that were shopping at our house, and my wife and my 2 kids. So they got to witness that. I didn't witness that. I created it. I did it, and I didn't witness it. They did. So my wife calls me and says, "Hey, Erik, they're here to get you." And I was like, "Well, what in the hell are you talking about?" And she said, "The FBI's here to get you." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Where are you?" And I said, "You know where I'm at. I'm at John's office. I was at my bankruptcy attorney's office." And the lady who was the head of the FBI grabbed her phone and said, "We're coming. Stay right where you're at." And so I stayed there, and I sat there, and I said, "What do I do? I don't know it. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what's happening. But they're here to arrest me." And John's like, "Just sit there, and we'll take care of it. When they get here, we'll go outside, and you'll do whatever they say."
Holy smokes, man! I can't imagine.
Yeah, and it's brutal just to think back on it, because it didn't need to come to that. It didn't have to. If they wanted to talk to me, I would have gladly come in to talk to them. But from what I know now, that because I was making that move and the jurisdictional thing that they have, they needed to start my case in
Indiana.
In Fishers. So I was arrested that day, cuffs behind my back, put in the back of a car, and taken downtown to the federal building. And that was a new low. That was pure panic.
And when was this? What, July you said?
Yeah, July of 11.
Gosh, okay.
Yeah, July of 11. And that was on a Friday. And I thought in my head, because they were asking me questions when we were driving down there. I thought in my head I was going to spend, the weekend in the tank. And they said, "Well, we got lucky, and you can go in front of the judge, this afternoon." And it was like 2:00 in the afternoon on Friday. So I got released on my own recognizance. Found out what they were after me for. They had done some investigation, and I'll discuss that here in a minute. But they released me, and I will never forget when my wife came to pick me up at the federal building. They said, "You're free to go." And I walked out of the federal building in downtown Indianapolis, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have anything. They took all my stuff, and my phone I left at my attorney's office. And so I got a hold of a phone and called my wife, and I said, "You can come pick me up now." And I remember that hour or so it took her to come get me.
Yeah.
I remember just thinking, like, I gotta go home. I'm gonna probably do it again. Like I'm probably gonna. I can't face this. There's no way. And that's the one and only time I ever thought about that ever again. Thought about what I would do when I would get home. Like, how am I gonna face my neighbors? How am I gonna face my wife? What in the world are my 6 and 10-year-old gonna say to me?
Yeah.
That just talked to a police officer and they were looking for Dad. Fully armed with machine gun police officer. What am I gonna do? Where do I start? What do I do? And it's just I can't explain the panic. I can't explain the hopelessness that I had. And so she drove me home, and we were pretty silent on the way home.
Yeah, I bet.
It was pretty silent. And then we just literally went inside because we had a couple neighbors that were outside when I pulled in. I said, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just go inside, shut the garage door, and we'll go in there and talk to the kids. And we talked to the kids, and they were, I mean, they're 16,
Yeah,
10.
I mean, I get it.
They
Yeah,
don't really know what's going on.
right.
So we just talked to them a little bit, and then she and I just downloaded everything by ourselves.
Yeah.
And I, to be honest with you, I don't really recollect that conversation too much.
Yeah.
And I think it's mainly because all I really felt was panic.
Yeah.
And
I can't
and just
imagine, man. I mean, shit.
trying to understand what in the world just
Yeah.
happened. And I'm replaying the last 8 years in
Right.
my mind. Like,
Right.
what did I do here? What did I do here? What did I do here? And it's like, okay. And then I finally got an opportunity to talk to my attorney, and he fully read to me what they were looking at me for. And it was for deals that we did back in 2005. It was way back. But what triggered it was the fact that I was going through foreclosures, the fact that, you know, and after that, about a week later, I got an opportunity to sit down with the FBI. They called it a proffer. And I sat down with them for like 8 hours. And I brought all my boxes in, and I brought all the stuff in. I said, hey, here's what we do. Here's what we're doing. And they said, well, did you do this, and this? And I said, yes, I did that. And the scenario was we sold 5 homes to, we flipped 5 homes at the very beginning to get cash. And the first 4 that we flipped, we brought the money to the closing table. And there's a small statement at the bottom of a HUD statement that says the funds to close must come from the borrower. Well, I was given, the people who were buying them had money in like 401ks or IRAs or whatever, and it was going to take them like 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 weeks sometimes to get that money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to wait that long, so I just paid the down payment. I brought a check in my company's name to the closing table and gave them the money.
Gotcha.
And the first 4 times that we did it, no title agent or nobody ever brought that to my attention that was wrong. I had no idea that it was wrong.
Yeah.
Well, the 5th one, the title agent said, hey, you know you can't do that, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, look at this sentence right here. This is why you can't do that. I had a closing 2 hours after that I had to have that money for. So I went ahead and still did it. And that's where I committed a felony. And so, but there was a lot of other things that triggered that. You know, investors were losing money. There was a couple scenarios where I was borrowing money from investors on second mortgages. There was other things involved that triggered that. But really, ultimately, what they were looking at, they went all the way back to 2005. We did 80. At that point in time, we had, between flipping and rentals, we probably did 100 houses. Yeah. And the 5 that bit me were the first 5 I ever did. And those first 5, the way the federal system works. So let me take a step back. When we moved to Joplin, so I was under investigation. They knew that they knew exactly what I had done. I admitted to bringing that check for the 5th one. I had to because it was in my company's name.
Sure,
it's like, right there, plain as day.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, okay. And they said, okay, well, we'll get back to you. And I said, well, we're in a week. We're getting ready to move to Joplin. Do I have permission to move to Joplin? Took me a couple weeks to get the permission, but they ended up letting us go. Okay. So I'm under investigation and under the jurisdiction of the Indianapolis FBI department, but we moved to Joplin. Okay. So I've got all that weighing on me. I'm living in the basement of somebody I don't really even know. I brought my whole family, 9 hours away from home. Yeah. I'm consulting with a church that doesn't know that I'm under investigation with the FBI. I'm living in a home of a family that doesn't know I'm under investigation of the FBI. Yeah. I'm holding all that back from everybody because if I don't, they're gonna say get out. Yeah. At least in my mind. Yeah. Right? Yeah. They're gonna say get out. Yeah. And I'm gonna have to move back to Indy, and what the hell am I gonna do for any money? Right. And so we continue to work in Joplin. We continue to do that all summer, all fall, all winter, and then we move back in August because Jen got a teaching job.
August of 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, August of 12.
Okay.
And so Jen got a teaching job, and I've got these notes.
I'm trying to keep the timeline. I'm tracking with you. Yeah.
I appreciate you keeping me on point. So August of 12, we moved back because Jen got a teaching job at Hamilton Southeastern. Okay. So thank God she got that. Yeah. And so she got that job. So I get a letter in the mail. Well, first my attorney called me and said, "Hey, Eric, be looking for something in the mail. You're going to get convicted of a felony. Like it's pretty much a done deal."
Okay.
And we're talking to him during this 9 months while I'm out in Joplin, and we're working things out and doing what we got to do. And
yeah.
but they sent me an official letter saying, "Hey, you know, you've been convicted of one count of mail fraud."
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it was mail fraud is because I had brought a cashier's check to
they tacked
to
that
the
on
closing,
to it. Yeah.
and it was an internet or cross-state
Yeah.
banking
Yeah.
with Chase Bank. And so because I brought that there, and mail fraud's kind of a catch-all for the federal system.
Okay.
So they charged me with one count of mail fraud. And so this is September of 2012. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. But I am hopeful that I could get some kind of probation. I could get something going on.
Yeah.
And long story short, they sentenced me in October of 2012 to 21 months in federal prison.
Didn't you? I think when you and I talked once before too, though, they put the scare tactic on you pretty hard in terms of like, this is what you're.
Yeah. They totaled it all up.
Yeah.
Did, if we did this, it was basically, here's two choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I don't know the exact number. It's like 95% of cases in the federal system plea out.
Yeah.
Here's why.
Yeah.
They put two choices in front of you. You get what we just offered you.
Yeah.
21 months, and there's a couple other scenarios involved there.
Yeah.
You get 21 months, or we're going to charge you with A, B, C, D, E, and F, and you're facing 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty easy choice.
Yeah.
On what you can fight it.
I can't imagine, dude.
You can fight it.
Yeah.
You can fight it if you don't think you did something wrong. But I knew what they said was wrong.
Yeah.
And I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I had no defense.
Yeah.
I did what they said I did, and I had to choose that. So I knew in October of 2012 that I was going to prison. And so December 31st of 2012, New Year's Eve, I self-reported to federal prison camp in Manchester, Kentucky. And that was the darkest time of my life, I think. Maybe the second darkest time of my life.
I don't know how you could say that.
Well, that day in my basement was the darkest time.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I do want to go back and talk about is from August or October when I was sentenced to the time I reported to prison.
Yeah.
Was fearful because of the fear of the unknown. What does prison look like? I mean, everybody's seen the prison stories and all that stuff. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
I'm not the most intimidating guy in the world. It's like, what does my next year and a half of my life look like?
Right.
Well, obviously, as I did before, let thoughts run in my head and panic sets in and that fear of the unknown. I mean, you're getting an hour of sleep a night, and you're just a wreck, and I look back at pictures during that time and I look like I'm like a meth head. I mean, I'm my cheekbones, you can see my cheekbones. I lost all kinds of weight.
Yeah.
I just looked terrible. I looked absolutely terrible. And so, but during that time, with all that stuff going on and all those thoughts running through my head, during that time were some stories, were some things that happened to me where I was like, okay, this transparency thing works. This honesty thing works. So let's give it a little bit more, a little more trust here, a little more trust there.
Yeah.
And some guys came into my life, some different people. My friend Joe came into my life through a referral, and he had walked in my shoes 10 years prior.
Yep.
And so he, along with two other guys who had walked in my shoes, about that same time frame, about 10 years prior, came into my life, and they just instructed me. They told me what was going on. They allowed those thoughts in my head to disappear because it wasn't what I was thinking it was going to be. And my day-to-day life was this, 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 and this, and it was very regimented, and it was going to be this, and you can expect this, and you can expect to do that. Well, it ended up being true.
Yeah.
And those guys, I think not only helped me, but helped my wife.
Yeah.
Because 2 of the guys, their wives came to that meeting and meetings after that, and were able to share, hey, here's what Jen's life's going to look like while I'm gone.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to do. Here's the people, you need to get people around you that can help you, because this is what this is going to look like. This is what this is going to look like. And during the time that she was gone, there was a few times where they reached out and were able to help.
Yeah.
But there was also, a story within my church. I went to this really big church at the time, and there was a whole bunch of people prior to me being sentenced that would come up to me and say, they had found out what was going on, and they're like, hey, we're just praying for you that you don't go to prison, or we're just praying for you for that. For this. And I finally got to a point, I was like, I've said this many, many times. I finally got to a point, it's like, after my sentencing was over, I was like, what about all these people praying for me? Like, that didn't work. And then those same people that were praying for me not to go to prison were now praying for me to be safe while I was in there.
Yeah.
I was like, I finally got to the point, I was like, look, I don't want to hear anymore.
Pray all you want.
I don't want to hear it, because it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's so wrong.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, like, my mind, I just can't explain to you. For 3 years, my mind was just in a fog.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have a sense of reality. But
Yeah.
all I knew was, do not tell me you're praying for me.
Right.
And I know they could read it in my body language.
Yeah.
When they'd say it, I'd be like, oh, shit. Like,
Yeah.
Come on, man. So I just got really jaded by the whole "I'm praying for you" thing.
Yeah.
And there's that's at the root of what you and I talk about a lot, with not putting that stuff in front of people until they ask for it.
That's right.
There's a reason.
Or until
why.
it finds them. I mean, look, we've talked a lot about how I think, from a patient's perspective, the dude that we believe in, man, he's got all the patience in the world. So there's no rush in it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
But if you need it, it's there. I mean, and that's what the cool thing is, I think, about being able to unpack that.
Yeah. So during that time period prior to reporting to prison, it was something that it was terrible, and there was some seeds being planted all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was great. And so it's great now.
Yeah.
And so that 2012 New Year's Eve, I reported to prison.
Yep.
And I didn't want to put my wife through that, to drive me 5 hours down to Kentucky and have to go through watching her husband go into prison. So my parents volunteered to take me down there. And I will never forget the afternoon that my dad and my mom dropped me off. We had a good conversation.
It's not like dropping you off of college, is it?
No, man. And I remember my mom getting out of the car. She was sitting in the back, and she was coming around the car to give me a hug. And my dad looked over at me, and he said, son, he goes, if I could serve your time for you, I would.
Yeah.
And that was really a springboard for him and I. We had been really close before.
Yeah.
But there was that took it to a different level.
Yeah.
Like if it's kind of what God does for us, right? Like he takes our pain. That's what my dad offered me that day.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it, but he would have. He absolutely would have done it that day.
Yeah.
And we had a good hug. I kissed my mom goodbye and walked into a freaking prison. I walked into a prison that day on New Year's when everybody was back in Indy celebrating and having a good time. I was walking into a freaking prison.
2013, right?
2012.
2012. Okay.
2012.
Yeah.
So I New Year's Eve, and so I walk in there. You go check in, you do all your stuff, and then they walked me over to the camp. I actually walked into a medium, so we walked over to the camp, and they have a thing called count, where they, in the morning and the afternoon, they count, so they make sure everybody's there. Well, I had to make it there before the afternoon count, so I got there right before the afternoon count. Met my cellie, met my guy I was rooming with, Donnie, and he kind of just offered me, hey, here's what to expect. Here's what, just kind of a general stuff. He had been in prison for 15 years prior to that. And so I'm just freaking out. Like, I don't know what to expect. And so right after count is chow. and I'm walking to chow, having no idea where I'm going, what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I look over, and on the way to chow is the chapel. And I was like, okay, thank the Lord. I got some place to go if I need to.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't even know it was there. So I see the chow line and everything. So about 2 days after that, I'm getting acclimated. I'm getting a routine. I'm trying to figure out what in the hell's going on. You know, regret, shame, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just riddled. It's just got a hold of me.
Yeah.
And so I go to chapel that day, like 2 or 3 days, and I meet a group of guys.
Yeah.
I met like 10, 12 guys. They're like asking me about me, you know, asking about my story and just asking about everything. Well, before I came to prison, that big church, those same people that were praying for me not to go to prison.
Yeah.
Once I was going to prison, they were telling me that I was going there on a mission to save souls.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're like,
it makes you chuckle, makes me chuckle.
You're like, what do you mean?
Well, no.
No, I get you.
No, here's how foggy it was for me.
Yeah,
I took that and I ran with it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how I'm going to make it through 18 months. I'm going to go there and I'm going to tell everybody about Jesus. I'm going to tell everybody about hope and glory and all this stuff. And I just ate it up.
Yeah.
And I ate it up. And I was like, okay, so I went in there. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm sitting there talking to these guys in a group.
Yeah.
And I'm telling them my story. And I'm like, but I'm here for a different purpose. I'm here for something else.
Yeah.
And for about the next 2 weeks, I'm telling these guys, and one guy in specific, what I'm there to do.
Yeah.
And I'm there to save souls.
Yeah.
I'm there to bring people to Christ. I'm there to help people. I'm there to do that. And about 2 weeks into me telling this one individual, his name is Chitty. He's from Chittibay is his first name. He called him Chitty. 6'4", big dude. You know, no neck. You know, arms as big. A little
bigger than you.
Big as my waist. A little bit bigger. Very intimidating guy. Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and he was very comforting.
Yeah.
He was a very nice guy. He'd sit across from me, just listening to me. And I remember like a couple times I'm telling him my story, and he's just like smirking at me. And I'm like, what the is this guy like smirking at me all the time for?
Yeah.
Like, why is he smirking at me? Well, 2 weeks into me telling the story, we're getting ready to go to chow, and he goes, "Hey, Eric, what are you here to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm here. I think I'm on a mission from God to help save souls." He said, "Do you know the story of Paul?" And I said, "Yeah, I know the story of Paul." And he said, "Well, tell me a little bit about it." And for those listeners that don't know the story about Paul in the Bible, before he found Christ, his name was Saul.
Oh yeah.
Found God on the road to Damascus, became Paul.
Yep.
And prior to him
he's
becoming a Christian,
he's a bad dude.
He killed Christians.
Oh yeah, he's a bad dude.
Lots of stuff, bad stuff. But when he found Christ, he was on a mission to go tell people about God. Well, ended up he got put in prison for that, for the sake of the gospel.
A couple times.
Yeah. and not the prison I was at.
Yeah,
We're talking about real prison.
Yeah.
And so what I was being told was I was doing Paul's work. I was going into prison to do Paul's work.
Yeah.
That's what I was being filled. My mind was being filled with. And I rolled with it.
Yeah. And
so I told Chitty that one day. He goes, "Eric, do you know the story of Paul?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "No, you don't." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because Paul was in prison for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
You're in prison because you committed a crime."
I'm sure that was.
And dude, I must have turned white as a ghost. And I was like, this son of a bitch, like he just ruined my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And I was mad at him for like a whole week.
I bet you were.
I was pissed. I was like, okay, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like these guys know I'm a phony. Like they, you know, and what that did for me was I cringe when I say this, is when I walked into prison, I was up here and everybody else in that prison was down here.
Yeah.
And in an instant, what Chitty did for me was he took me and put me right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, "Hey man, you got a number on your chest.
Yep.
Just the same as I do and everybody else in this room does. You're not here to save anybody.
That's right.
You're not here to do anything. You're here to hopefully get an opportunity to relax, get an opportunity to deal with the shit that you've created and do all that." But he said to me, he goes, "But I'll be watching you."
Yeah.
And I remember for the next couple of weeks, we'd get in chow, and every once in a while he'd come up and bump my shoulder and
check in on you.
Yeah, just check in on me. I'm like, get the hell away from me. I was mad at him. I didn't want to talk to him.
Yeah.
And we are there's a lot of really good and really bad stories that happened to me in prison.
Yeah. Well, let's do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to let everybody take a little bit of a breather here because I know I need one. I'm just amazed, at hearing this, because I know you and I have talked a lot, about your experiences and things like that, and what you went through in prison and kind of that whole story up to it. So just to kind of set the stage where we were, right, talking a little bit about your businesses, what you went through there, really going through a pretty dark time of your life, going through an experience that, is one that you won't forget, I'm sure, right? In your mindset, right? And being humbled.
Yeah.
And then going through this experience of what happened because of the businesses and landing in Kentucky.
Yeah. My choices. Yeah.
It's up until this point is pretty wild, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you think about it. So we're going to take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
We're going to come back in our next episode and hear how this thing kind of lays itself out over the next few months, right, and years.
Yeah.
You and I are in that part of time frame, and I know we've shared with some folks on a previous podcast, but hear a little bit more of what happens towards the tail end of your prison experience, and then kind of post that. So,
that'd be great.
Everybody tune in, stay in. This is it. Listen, building a refuge is all about hope, right? Eric, you mentioned it on the front end of this, and I think these stories, I trust, will get out to people somewhere that, I hope provides a little bit of hope.
That's
so
right.
We'll come back at you, and stay tuned for the next episode.
That's right.
Okay, clear.